Hi, my name is Dan Davis. I'm the CEO of Rockpoint Leisure, which is a regeneration company we founded 3 years ago, hospitality based, to try and regenerate an area of the country, New Brighton, which has been overlooked and forgotten by multiple councils and government.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brez. I'm one of the local street artists here in Rockpoint Leisure.
So, should we start with the obvious one that's behind you, the name of the pub?
Yeah, that's the latest name change. So, the pub we're sat in at the moment upstairs it used to be called the Railway, and it was closed for about 3 or 4 years. Boarded up, all shuttered up, like a lot of the road was. And in 2018, I decided to try and regenerate this road, which is one of the roads I grew up on. And we bought we got the lease on the pub, and we decided to open it, refurb it, and they'd call it the James Averton. James Averton was the original founder of New Brighton. Rockpoint Leisure is the original name New Brighton used to be called. So in 1830, James Averton, who lived in Liverpool, his view was of 170 acres of sand dunes called Rockpoint. He came over from Everton, bought them off a landowner, and then decided to go to Brighton on the south coast and form come back and form a New Brighton in the north. So really this was about sort of history of the place, and that's why we called it James Averton. After we changed it the first time, the second lockdown, so we'd been through the first lockdown where they said we were going to be closed for a couple of weeks. It was 3.5 months. Although it briefly opened when we did the sort of eat out to help out scheme and things, we were then back in another lockdown. And knowing that what they'd told us time-wise was likely to be inaccurate, judging by the first lockdown, it was when I'd got all the team together from the different sites that we have on this road to have a staff meeting the night of the lockdown and say, look guys, we're sorry, we're going to be locked down again, we don't know when we're going to be open. There was, obviously people were upset, worried about the jobs, about the future of New Brighton, and this was replicated up and down the country. And going home that night I was that annoyed. I'd referred to them as the bellends in power, and I went back and decided to change the name. So we had the name changed. Got the designer, local designer who does all our sort of branding and things, to work through the night with a mate of mine, Carl, who's got Innovate Signs over in Aintree. And we renamed the pub, including all the signage and A-boards and things like that. And I think at the time it was just a reaction to how a lot of people felt across the industry and the country about being locked down, about having no certainty when we're going to be open again. And it did generate a lot of interest and support. We had letters from all around the world, different continents, and all around the UK. Just saying you cheered us up and you made us laugh. And it was on the I Got News for You and a variety of other channels. So that was the first name change. Obviously we've all been waiting for the reopening, which was meant to happen on Monday. And as usual, it sort of started getting leaked that we weren't likely to be open again. So we decided another name change. We'd taken the free bellend signs down long before. It was only a temporary change, and we reverted back to the James Averton. And then we decided that another one was appropriate. So knowing that Dominic Cummings had already gone, and the two people really left sort of driving the agenda was obviously Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock. So again, we got some of the team together and decided to do the latest name change. So that went up last week.
Have you faced any issues since the name changes?
The first one, we got a bit of, 99.9% of the people saw the humour in it, the funny side. There's always going to be a few people who don't see the humour in this sort of thing, and I think that the government are fairly thin-skinned. My argument back was that there's countries that I know I wouldn't have been able to do this in, such as North Korea, probably Russia or Turkey or China. But the UK, 2020, 2021, I thought, we still have freedom of speech. Hopefully we can still have a laugh, and the comedy, I think, is one of the most important things. Being able to laugh and have a tongue-in-cheek sort of poking fun at the establishment, I think, is actually crucial.
So how did Rockpoint Leisure start then?
Rockpoint Leisure started in 2018, and it really came on the back of me selling a company I started in New Brighton in 1991 when I was 18. And it started as a little training company, ended up going to a global company where we operated in 28 countries, training for some of the biggest brands in the world, with our offices in Birkenhead, 250 staff in. And when I was in New York and I decided I'd just done the deal to sell the first part of it to a big global outfit. And I just thought, what am I going to do with my, I still had the two roles that I do for the Institute of Licensing and UK Hospitality. I sit on those boards, it's very industry related. And I decided that I wasn't going to put any money in a pension. I could have just gone and retired and lived anywhere. But I've lived between London and the place I grew up, New Brighton, so I've always had a house here. And I just thought, at the end of the day, I wanted something to do and get my teeth into. I've been in the training and education sector and IT for a long time, 28 years. And I came back, I spent a lot of time in London, but I'd come back and walk down this road, and every time that I did, I'd see another place boarded up. So we've got a supermarket which has been boarded up for 6 years. This particular pub had been gone for about 3 years. Same with the restaurant over the road. Multiple other buildings. 3 banks with no banks in them. Bus stops with no buses coming to them. The supermarket had been Co-op twice, Summerfield, Quick Save, and Budgeons. Each one of them, closed. And if it became another one, I think it would be a huge, a huge bad thing for the road, because a lot of the little shops would shut. And it just really started to annoy me about how just how places like New Brighton get treated by people generally who couldn't even put a pin on the map where they are. They live in London. A lot of it is private equity money that backs the big brands that you see. People think we have a choice in New Brighton, but we don't. We have a choice of what they give us. So that's why we get a Hungry Horse, not a Miller and Carter, a Burger King, not a Nando's, a Travel Lodge, not a Hilton. And these are all decided by people who, in most cases, will never even set foot in the towns and cities around the UK and the world, where they just roll these out, because for them it's just on a spreadsheet. So it was really a bit of, bit of anger about what was going on, and a bit of, actually, rather than just talking about it, why don't we try and turn it around? Get some residents together. Places like this have a strong community, but it gets, beaten out of them, any sort of community spirit, by decisions that get made by either people in London who think the North is Islington, or successive councils who, in large parts, have made decisions that have been very, very detrimental to places like New Brighton. So New Brighton used to have the largest open-air baths in the world. It's now Morrison's. We used to have 2 piers at the end of the road, 11 theatres. We used to have the biggest ballroom in Europe, and there's the biggest tower building in the country on top of the ballroom, bigger than Blackpool Tower. So all of that, over the years was underinvested, not run properly, and ended up getting, destroyed or taken away. And what it meant is, when I grew up in the sort of 80s around here, I was born in 73, like a lot of seaside towns, we'd seen better times. The infrastructure hadn't been invested in. We had 2 piers that were deemed that unsafe. They had to be dynamited, and it took like 4 dynamitings to do it. That's how unsafe they were. The first time, I think, just one like a piece of paint fell off after the explosion. That was it. And the pier was like that, really. So it just started really annoying me, and I have to say in the last 3 years I've remained pretty annoyed about just how you can understand why things like this don't happen.
I think a lot of the money was put into it down on the front, and up here is very much forgotten about until you came along.
Well, that's exactly right. It was a sticking plaster down on the front, and to replace. It's not a compelling reason to visit anywhere. It's not a compelling reason to go, I know, let's go to New Brighton. Not because we had the UK's, the Europe's, the world's biggest and best something, and dozens of other activities and things to do. Instead, we replace it with the Morrisons, or a Starbucks and a few other things. That's not a compelling reason to have a weekend away and come and visit. And, literally just a few streets back from the promenade, you have places just ravaged by years of neglect.
What would you like to see for the future of New Brighton?
Well, I want to see it being, it has turned around quite a bit. We've had, 2018, we didn't know we were in or out of Europe. So there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of a turnaround here. But it was a high risk sort of thing to do. What I thought, we couldn't just go and build the UK's biggest, tower again, straight away, or do anything like that, because it takes a vast amount of money to do something like that. We've spent about £6.5 million in the last 3 years. We haven't had 6.5 pence in funding from anywhere, from the council, from government. So this really has been just a group of individuals trying to turn the place around that they live in and care about. The future, I think, needs to be quite bold. So I think we've got to put ourselves back on the map, and we're busy creating the biggest 3 open-air street art gallery in the UK, which I think in the next sort of 18 months we will have achieved, and that will continue organically to grow. And it's a mixture of local and internationally acclaimed artists. Adam's a real success story because he's a local artist who I met. Really talented guy, musician, artist, and he did his first wall on one of the pubs there, and he's subsequently done another one, and multiple other images and pieces of art around the place. And it's this sort of thing where you think we want to give a platform and an opportunity through independence, fiercely sort of independent the place, keep all the big brands and names out, and give opportunities for new start businesses, ideas. And we want to major on things like art, music, culture, but also bring other choices, so food and beverage, different offers from ideas around the world. And some retail. The high streets have been dying, and a lot of it is down to, there's multiple reasons. Lockdown hasn't helped because likes of Amazon and people are sucking up the market. But I think the experience of walking down a traditional high street, and one that doesn't involve you just walking down somewhere where if you were parachuted in blindfolded, you literally wouldn't know where you were, because they're all exactly the same. Very few stand out. So we wanted to make ours stand out, protect the little businesses that are still here that haven't been run out of town by the big corporates. So we've got a barber shop, we've got the greengrocers, which has been here 45 years, Ian Forber. We've got opticians, we've got the post office, pharmacy, some base things that you need on a high street. So we wanted to protect them at all cost, and then start enhancing it and make sure that the sort of places we got, so we bring in lots of buildings back into use that were derelict.
So when I was outside then, I've just asked you if you're going to have like an LGBT night in one of your venues and that, and you told me something that's quite exciting.
Yeah, I think that, bearing in mind, New Brighton was based on Brighton, which has obviously a large LGBT community, and so have we here. But all that has been, if you like, but the only thing that's catered for every now and again is that somebody might put on an LGBT night. And there hasn't been one of them for a long time, but one of the pubs down the road used to do it. And one of the first things that we thought was, well, it's ridiculous, it's based on Brighton, and yet there's no representation really. And I'm not into having a night for something when there's such a big community. I think they should have their own venue. So quite early on when we got the old Tallulah's bar, which is an old it's a beautiful building, grade 2 listed, bank, which was a Barclays bank. We decided that we were going to open it up again as Tallulah's, which people were very fond of, and have it as an LGBT venue. So you want to have a bit of a mix between, say, the Moulin Rouge meets the Birdcage, and have it just have it full time, absolutely no apology for what it is all the time. We operate 7 days a week, 7 nights a week, so we're in the process of renovating it at the moment, and really that's for that community to organically sort of grow that, and that we'll put on and cater for whatever they want. But I think it is important to make New Brighton as diverse as possible, as inclusive as possible, and to celebrate human beings. We have more in common than we have apart, and that I just think that we want to make New Brighton a safe place, one that is anchored with things like art and music and culture, and make it somewhere which is totally inclusive. When I grew up in the 80s here, it was a place where it wasn't that welcoming, from having swastikas drawn on the walls, not particularly, sort of integrated. A lot of the people here, just wouldn't leave a few postcodes. And I think the more you travel, the more, the world moves on, the more important it is for a town like this, if we're regenerating it, to make sure that we've, that it's an inclusive place that caters for everyone. So it's an exciting project, and I think that it's something, though we'll start it off, I think it will, organically grow with the community around here. So it's quite an exciting project, which is on the go now.
I think it would be vital that the community has a safe space as well, after everything that's been going on recently with attacks and stuff like that. It's important, and
I think it's always sad when you see these sort of attacks and things, but I think in so many ways we've moved forwards, and this sort of takes us a step back, and also if someone gets attacked, that can affect them for the rest of their life. They could either be physically injured, but it's the psychological scars of things like that. And an attack doesn't have to be physical, it can be verbal abuse, it can be, that sort of thing, and I just think it's terrible. And again, we've got enough problems that we're facing at the moment as a nation, that I think that, again, that's one of the reasons we're really keen to make the place inclusive. And make it very safe as well, which it will be.
I think moving on to a bit of a happier topic, I think one of the most startling things when you walk down this road now is how bright and vibrant it all is with the artwork. So how did that start?
Well, I've always been into art, been a bit of a frustrated artist and musician and photographer. I used to my own darkroom and the A-level photography at Mosslins school. So I've always had an interest in it, and the other thing is, when you walk up and down the road, if you look at the new development in New Brighton, there's over some nice places there. At the end of the day, it's a breeze block and glass building that people, make their own inside. And when you walk up and down a road like this, it's got some beautiful buildings that you just walk past and you don't notice them. Now you do notice them. You notice the architecture, you notice the quirkiness of them, and we don't want to knock anything down. We want to renovate. It costs more money to do that, but I think what's important is to celebrate, the sort of beauty of some of the architecture here and bring it to life. So Adam was one of the first artists, sort of on board, but we also had we had, you know, a number of other artists coming up, and we still do. Insa is up again at the moment, and we've had people from all around the world, you know, from Australia, from France, all over the UK, you know, street artists that are renowned. Martin Luther King was one of the first things that we painted on, and that was on the back of a pub we didn't own on Hope Street, and we used the lyrics from one of the lyrics from U2's Pride in the Name of Love, and again, how music and art can change things. It was U2's music in the 80s that I listened to that made me, you know, interested in world affairs, made me join Amnesty International, made me more aware of the civil rights movement, and that's why we painted the image of Martin Luther King with the Pride lyrics. Early morning, April 4, shot rings out in a Memphis sky, free at last, they took your life but we can never take your pride. And Adam here, he's a local artist, very, very talented. He came on board with us. I think the first pub he did was next door, and it's the first time he'd been up in scaffolding. But since then he's been over to Amsterdam, done some spray painting courses there as well, and he's also worked with some of the biggest artists in the world, helping them. And in his own right now, he's done a big mural down the road, which I'll let him tell you about. Celebrating Peggy Gadfly, who is the Gatsby. The Gadfly was what the nickname was for him. A guy with one leg who used to dive off the pier for pennies. So some of the art is quite contemporary, some of it is abstract, and then there's other, you know, pieces that tell a bit of a history of the town, or some of the people in the town, and that's from the past. And in the case of the RNLI one, you know, the present. So art's a key part. And if you look at, you know, out the window there at the post office and pharmacy, it's a beautiful building, but people just walk past without even seeing it. In 1862 or 1868, it says, you know, it was built, and people just walk past it and never noticed. Now everyone stops, takes photographs, and that burst of colour, vibrancy, and the different types of art, I think, are very important. And also having the gallery open. Gallery, I think, makes it more accessible, and that's why we have it on the high street here, because a lot of people, art can be viewed as very elitist, and it can be quite intimidating to walk into an art gallery for some people, and that's why we brought it right on the high street here. You know, we have the guys running it, Jacob, and is at university, but he's immersed himself in sort of art. While he's working, you know, part-time here, and we've got Johnny, who's another artist who has the studio next door to Adams above Rockpoint Records, so he's another emerging local talent that, you know, has got a very, very bright future. But I mean, these guys are the real experts and the real talent.
It's amazing to celebrate local people as well, so
absolutely. And just on that point, I mean, I did have a couple of comments saying, well, but you should just use local artists. And you just go, okay, let's try that one. Imagine if Glastonbury had said, we're only using artists from Somerset. I don't think we'd be calling it Glastonbury now, because no one would have ever heard of it. If you have the opportunity to work with some of the best international artists, and we also develop local artists, I think that mix is absolutely vital. It gives them opportunities. You know, it means that you know, everyone is trying to achieve more and stretch their you know, ability and their artistic sort of, you know,
brings international artists, brings international people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everywhere, so. And
with a population of 15,000 people, New Brighton needs tourism. It needs visitors. It needs day trippers. It needs footfall. You know, there's not enough people living in places like New Brighton to sustain a vibrant sort of economy. So by doing things like this, having it as a bit of a centre of excellence, a bit of a creative hub, it you know, attracts people who want. I mean, we get artists coming here saying, we get paid big corporate money to do stuff. We want to come here because it's real. It's not going to be painted over a few weeks later. It's not an advert for something, and we give them quite a bit of artistic sort of freedom as well.